Hey everyone, CW Music Reviews here. I'm CWD, and this is going to be a music review of the new Bad Bad Not Good album 4. Bad Bad Not Good are a jazz instrumental hip-hop group, recently now a group and formerly a trio, and this is their latest full-length album. There are very few bands, acts, and projects that I'm as proud of as Bad Bad Not Good. To go from doing these Legend of Zelda covers in jazz rendition, to go from that to coming up with original compositions for one of the members of the Wu-Tang Clan within just 5 years is actually pretty impressive. It's not just that, it's also their tendency for great performances as well as creative ideas when it comes to either coming up with their own music or just covering someone else's. From their first album where, like I mentioned, they did this Legend of Zelda medley, as well as some instrumental hip-hop covers, then proceeding on their second album with more of that, but to also include James Blake covers, Feist covers, even a My Bloody Valentine cover, and even incorporating more and more of their original content. Then they dropped their third album, which was entirely of original compositions, and while I did enjoy that album a lot, it lacked in a lot of the improvisation and eccentricity that I liked about the first two projects. And as much as I admire them for doing the instrumentals for that collaborative Ghostface Killah album, it to me remains as probably my least favorite Bad Bad Not Good affiliated project. However, with this new album, 4, I was definitely intrigued with what it is that the guys could be up to. Especially since, like I mentioned, they recently became a quartet instead of a trio, and the fact that they have guest features on this album. They've had guest features before, but this time these are like non-jazz affiliated features that really intrigued me quite a bit. So what do I think of this project? Well, I do like this album a lot. It's definitely one of my favorite albums of July. I can't say that it's my favorite of Bad Bad Not Goods, however. Unfortunately, it comes just a little short from being my favorite, and I think they have a ways to go before dethroning themselves. This album's about 11 tracks in length, about 40 or so minutes, maybe close to 50 minutes. So it's a pretty average length. It feels like an average length. So I admire it quite a bit for that. All the while, this pretty much remains their most experimental and simultaneously accessible project to date. The song lengths are not as long and progressive as albums like 2, albums like 3. Add to that, the incorporation of Leland Whitty as a member of Bad Bad Not Good has really opened their instrumental palette. I mean, when you go through this, the personnel, it's actually kind of remarkable how much instrumentation Leland Whitty himself just contributes to this one album. And I always thought he was just known as the saxophone guy. No, he's the everything else in between guy. He contributes 3 different types of sax. He contributes 2 different types of clarinet, violin, guitar, both electric and acoustic, flute I believe. It's quite remarkable how much he's able to contribute, all the while still really favoring the saxophone in the music itself. His sax playing is actually pretty remarkable, like on the title track, Speaking Gently, and Confessions Part 2, which features Colin Stetson, and the way these two multi-instrumental weirdos are able to just have a lot of chemistry between the two of them, it's actually quite remarkable. I will say that the tracks with guests on them are pretty much the best ones on the record. And that's not to say that all the other tracks without guests are crap or anything. It's just that these guests pretty much incorporate a lot of interesting ideas and quite a bit of visceral composition in a way. Like the track The Time Moves Slow, which features Sam Herring of Lonely Island. His vocals are fantastic. His really smooth, soulful, and I dare say sexy tone really captures the melancholic atmosphere of time moving so slow when you've broken up with someone or they just ripped your heart to shreds or something like that. And of course you have the track with Colin Stetson, Confessions Part 2, which is probably my favorite track on the record. I can recognize Colin Stetson's saxophone tone anywhere. He just has that unique of a tone as well as a unique style of playing that I admire a lot. And for him to just come in and really add his own minimalist and really experimental flair to what could have been a regular old jazz improv track is pretty fantastic. There's also the track Lavender, which has Kaytranada incorporating some percussion as well as this really thick and really bass heavy synth on this track. Kind of reminds me if on their album 2 they covered some kind of G-funk instrumental, but in the context of this being an original composition it really enhances. And there's a track Hyssop of Love, which has this really visceral and really forward thinking instrumental that really harkens back to their instrumental hip-hop days, especially when they have Mick Jenkins doing a rap verse. I love that opening line where he says that there's wolves in the sky. It's kind of hard to see when you have wool in your eyes. He's got like a lot of syntactual lingo that I enjoy quite a bit. Demonstrates how clever of a lyricist Mick is. His rap delivery is quite formidable. He even incorporates his own singing and it actually goes off particularly well, or as well as one could expect it to go. And the last of which, In Your Eyes, which features Charlotte Day Wilson, who really brings kind of an organic Portishead type vibe to this track. The way it just sounds like some vintage traditional pop or some vintage old school 80s or 90s pop that I enjoy quite a bit. Her voice is really colorful. It's really seductive. So yeah, those are the ones with guest features. My issue with the ones where it's just standalone Bad Bad Not Good is my issue with what I had with the standalone compositions off of their third album. Namely, the lack of improvisation and the lack of keeping a song engaging over the course of 4 to 5 minutes. The only exceptions to this rule being And That Too, the title track, as well as Cashmere. And That Too, pretty much because it's the opening track to the album, it definitely opens up with this kind of G-funkish, cinematic opening flair that I do enjoy quite a bit. The way these synths come in, as well as this like one da 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 musical refrain that comes up quite a bit that's replicated particularly well over the course of the track. The title track is pretty much this nice, really bright jazz improv jam that I enjoy quite a bit. It really does make me wish that there was more of these on this album, as well as more of these in Bad Bad Not Good's discography. The saxophone solos are fantastic. Everything just sounds so busy and so in the moment. The same goes for Cashmere, which I admire a lot because of how climactic it is and how, as the closing track, it just wraps everything up particularly well. And I guess Speaking Gently is a cool track too, namely when it just picks up the pace around the midpoint instead of just doing this whole bright, psychedelic, baroque-ish synth thing that comes up quite a bit. At first that came off as really shrill to me, but it grew on me over time. But other than those tracks, there's just this kind of lull that I can't really ignore, namely on the songs Chompy's Paradise and Structure Number 3, although the bridge on the latter does pick up, but it feels a little too late in that regard. So overall, I do dig this album quite a bit. There's definitely quite a bit of promise and artistic growth that Bad Bad Not Good is demonstrating with this album, especially given the Leland Whitty's appearance and membership for Bad Bad Not Good, along with incorporating all these guests and all of these really varied stylistic compositions, whether that be their jazz or instrumental hip-hop, along with some G-funk and some soul and maybe some psychedelia. This is definitely a album that tells me that Bad Bad Not Good still have quite a bit of ideas going for them, and they're still gonna keep doing them regardless of what may come down the road. However, I still think that they are short of outdoing themselves given the standard that they've set with their second album. I do definitely like this a lot more than 3. I do like this a little more than their first, and I definitely do dig this more than Sour Soul, but again, this is definitely not my all-time favorite of theirs, and I think if they do continue this path, and I do think they keep jamming out all these ideas and maybe let loose in the performances, then they could easily put out their best record to date. But as it is right now, this is close, but it's not as close as I'd want it to be. This album is a plus 2.4 out of plus 3. Despite my complaints, I dug this album quite a bit. You'll definitely want to check this out if you're into jazz music, instrumental hip-hop, maybe some electronic music, since there's definitely elements of that incorporated in here. I'm really rooting for these guys. I've been rooting for them since I heard their second album, and I'm definitely going to continue to keep rooting for them. But if you've given this album a listen, what'd you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reason for that? And what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? CW Music Reviews here, signing off.